So yeah, at the start of the fire format, I was thinking that Draw would be a really popular hand trap. And for that reason, I want to pick up Exosister again, because first of all, it can play Shifter. So that's the main reason why I wanted to try Exosister. But I realized that the deck is pretty solid. One issue that's kinda too fair, so if you do a small misstep, you often get punished really hard for that. But often, if you make the right decisions, the deck is still very strong. Because you can play a lot of non-engine, and also the engine is kinda resilient to hand traps. Not as good, because like all hand traps like Ash, Veiler and Imperm do hurt, but do definitely not kill the deck. It's just like, you get one interruption less if you get Impermed on your Michaelis, stuff like this. So yeah, that's also a reason why I want to give you the insight from the deck. I was playtesting the deck for the last like 2 months or so. I want to give you my opinion on the cards in the deck and maybe some insight to it. For the first card, I'm playing 3 copies of Martha. Shouldn't be too hard to see why I play this card, because it's basically circular, it's the best card in the deck. You can't say it's the only good Exosister monster because you can trigger her effect to exceed some. But yeah, she's just really important in the deck. Without her, the deck would still suck. But some things that we need to mention about her is, one thing that's really nice about her is that she clears cards like SP really good. And if you hand trap your opponent to death, he's probably still gonna end on an SP. And because you just use her in the hand, you don't have a monster on board, he can't use SP, you go into Michaelis and deal with the SP. For that, Martha is really nice. That's also the reason why the deck is pretty solid. And another thing that's really nice about Martha is that Martha takes care of summon limit. Because if you use the effect of Martha, you summon Elis together as one summon. So if opponent flips summon limit, you can still summon your Michaelis, banish summon limit and still play. Or just keep your opponent under summon limit and say, deal with it yourself. Then for the other EXO names, 3 copies of Stella. The reason I'm playing 3 copies is I just want to have the max consistency. And I'm playing 3 Stella, I make sure that I basically can play every time. Still, like, I think there's a 20% chance that you don't open 2 level 4 monsters. But yeah, but it's still, I think, worth it to play 3, just so that the consistency is at a maximum. The 3rd copy is also a card you can side out really easily. 3 copies of Elis. I think there's also nothing to explain here. You need to play 3 because you play 3 Martha, and she's also just an extender. And if you look at the monsters, I basically played at a ratio that every combination of 2 monsters lets you play the game. And that's also the reason why I'm only playing 1 Sophia and no Irene. The reasons why I couldn't play would probably be that you open stuff like Sophia and Irene. I really like drawing Sophia because the draw is just really nice, but playing 2 copies for that reason is probably not worth it, because then you start bringing on multiple normal summons. But Sophia is really nice. Every time I draw with her, I'm pretty happy. The only time I'm not happy is if I draw into Prosperity. The only reason you would want to play Irene is that you can summon them off of Vadis in your turn. But if you use Vadis in your turn, you're already happy if you summon those like Elis and Stella or Elis and Martha. It still works out, you will probably win the game if you get to this point. Then 3 Aratama. Some people only play 2, but like I said, the lineup for the monster is basically just max consistency. And one issue with Aratama is like that you can brick with him if you draw like Aratama and Stella. Because drawing those 2 together, they just don't do anything. Like, the good thing is you still have like full combo with him, because he alone is full combo, but the Stella in the hand is just a dead card. That's the reason why you would want to play less Stella or less Aratama. But overall, I still want to have max consistency, so I'm playing all names that are good at max. Also, what's really nice about those cards is that Aratama and Sakitama makes it way easier to go into Zeus, because if you get handed on a hospital, you are not locked into Exos. Often you would start with Martha, but if you start with the spirits, you can still summon Zeus way more often. And back then, it was way harder to summon the Zeus, because often you're just locked. And the spirits just makes it way easier. You can also just use other rank 4s that are floodgates and would probably be better in some matchups, like for example Baguska. Then 3 Sakitama. Sakitama in general is just great, because he's not just an extender, he lets you play through hand traps pretty easily, because there's no hand trap that stops you from summoning Sakitama from your hand. So you can always go into rank 4 like Hospital. If your Martha gets ashed, he's a great extender. He's just like the best extender in the deck. And another thing that's really great about Sakitama is that, similar to Martha, he works really well against cards like SP. So if you are playing a game of hand traps with your opponent still ends on SP, you just start with Sakitama, normal any level 4, and go into Michaelis, and Michaelis deals with SP. And that's also the reason why, if you want to side out some cards, I would never side out Sakitama over Aratama, even though Aratama alone is full combo. Sakitama going second is just way better than Aratama. Because if you summon Aratama and your opponent uses Imperm, you're screwed. If you start with Sakitama, you can basically always go into rank 4, except you get opponent uses some limit then, but that's just how it is then. And then for the spell, other EXO cards, 3 packs, the card's just great. It's emergency teleport, it's Rhoda, it's basically everything the deck wants. It's also an interruption to your opponent's turn because it's basically a mini Vadis. That's what's important because I'm only playing one Vadis and one Returnia. And often for going second, I side out one Vadis because Vadis is really strong in the matchups where it's good. But for going second, I rather see a card that's a non-engine card than a trap card in my hand. But Returnia is just a good. You need to play at least one deck so you always can have access to the banish. And if you count the Vadis, you can still use Pax as the interruption to your opponent's turn. Good part about this is, if you use Vadis near your opponent's turn, often there's the issue that you run into Nibiru during your opponent's turn. And the way I play the deck, most of the times, I just summon Michaelis and maybe if I start with Martha, also keep the Martha on board, so that I don't run into Nibiru. Always depends on hand. If I have enough non-engine to stop my opponent like 2 non-engine to a Returnia with the Martha on board and Michaelis, I'm probably fine. And if I only draw like level 4 names, you need to commit into Magnifica. But I just fear Nibiru too much, so that I won't have Nibiru dead every time I play against my opponent, because most of the times people will think Nibiru is just crazy against this deck, but the way to play around Nibiru for this deck is just play less. It's basically like Settlement Grade back then. Settlement Grade had no real way to play around Nibiru. The only way to play around Nibiru is make stuff like Bailing's Pass, and just don't commit that much into the board. Same for this deck. The only way that you could play around Nibiru would be Carpe Diem, but I just don't like Carpe Diem too much. Because for Carpe Diem to be really good, you would basically need to start with any way to have combo, like Aratama, or more often Martha plus level 4, 2 level 4s, stuff like that, and Pax, or even hard to draw the Carpe Diem. So you need like 3 cards that Carpe Diem is good, and I rather just be like, sure, I'll just make 4 summons, I'm fine. One thing that's with the traps is, often I would like a second Returnia, but often I also just run the games where I felt like I want to have the second Returnia, because, like I said, often I just make Michaelis pass, get access to trap and play the deck more like a trap deck, and then if I use Returnia on the crackback, I would need to commit into Magnifica, and if I have a second Returnia deck, I can just search this and don't need to commit in Magnifica, and sometimes, even going second, you have 5 summons to commit into Magnifica, and being able to search Returnia and just not commit into Nibiru would be way better then. So a second Returnia is a card that I'm always on the edge of playing. Then for the non-engine. You're playing Triple Prosp. It's just a great card. The one thing that I don't like about Prosp is that you basically need to play at least one card that you can dig towards to break a board, because otherwise Prosp is just not that great going second. It will just give you more consistency. That's also the reason why I'm playing the Triple Chalice. Because even though Chalice is just okay, you can hit stuff like the IP, that's really good, but you need to have a card you can dig forwards with Prosp. Otherwise Prosp is just not good enough in this deck, because for example, if you play against Voiceless Voice, if your opponent knows what he's doing and expects you to be only on hand traps, you can just let the Prosp resolve. Because what are you gonna do? You will use the first negate on your Martha, for example, and if he has the Ravis, you will go into Michaelis, you will just negate a summon, and there's no way that Exo plays through that just with Engine. The only way you might be able to break it somehow is if you have an Elis in your grave, use Pax, special summon Stella, and extend through that. So yeah, you definitely need some kind of non-engine that works with Prosperity. And Imperm is just not good enough for that. But yeah, Voiceless Voice was kind of a bad example because Chalice is horrible against Voiceless Voice. But against the fire decks, Chalice is pretty solid. Also, because of a side card that I'm playing, you need to have like a card like Chalice that deals with the board. So yeah, but I'll get to that later. Then, for the real reason to play the deck, Shifter. Heard it's a good card. And you basically want to win games by just drawing him because Exosister is not as great without Shifter. Then other hand traps, 3 Ash, 3 Raider, and 3 Imperm. I think I don't need to explain the Imperm and Ash, they are just solid right now. But the one thing that people might ask is why Raider? But the thing with Raider is it's just the best next hand trap. Sure, there's a contradiction with Shifter, so that if you throw Shifter you can't use Veiler, but often if you throw Shifter you're already in a really good spot, because if it's Snake Eye they won't play, then you have Veiler for next turn. That's the reason why I'm playing Veiler, because it's only bad if you draw Shifter with Veiler and you're playing against a deck that doesn't care about Shifter. But Veiler's just way too good, because you could play Morna instead of Veiler, but Morna is just not good on normal summon of Ash, and I don't like Morna that much to play it over Shifter. Also, you can't really play Nibiru in this deck. In theory, you could play it like Kashtira back then, and just summon the token in attack position, crush Nibiru into the token, and then you are Gucci to summon Martha. But then you need to waste your battle phase, and it just doesn't feel that great in this deck. But in theory, you could play Nibiru, it just doesn't feel too good. And that's basically it for the hand traps. And I'm also playing the one called By the Grave. It's just solid. The deck is already hating the graveyard. You can use it to trigger your Martha. You can stop hand traps. It's solid on Princess and stuff like that. So Called by the Grave is just a solid card. Also, one thing I wanted to mention for the Exosisters that I forgot. There's the one spell card, the Almond, that I kinda like, because Almond is also a way that lets you play under Nibiru a little bit better. Because if you play Almond and you end on your Martha with Michaelis, you can just search for Almond. And if you have Returnia, it's even better. And you summon the Asophil in the draw phase of your opponent, so it's immediately under Abyss Driller. And then in the turn you can just flip Returnia and exceed summon the Michaelis and Asophil for the Magnifica. So Almond is also fine, but I think it's basically the same as Carpe Diem. It's only really good if you see like 3 engine cards, or like a Pax and 2 engine cards. And I'm not sure if I want to play this because it's not as consistent. Then for the extra deck, I'm playing 2 Magnifica. 2 is just completely fine, 1 isn't enough, second one comes up, third one never comes up. The only reason to play 3 of this would maybe be Unicorn, because if they get rid of one of the Magnificas, it can get pretty awkward for you, and then you would need a third one. But Unicorn is the only reason to play more than 2 Magnificas, because 2 Magnificas is just, from the get-go, and was always the best ratio for Magnifica. Then, oopsie, 3 Michaelis. Michaelis is basically the best monster in the extra deck. Searching for the trap is nice. Going second, she basically always goes 2 for 1, and she's just really great against a card like SP. So yeah, I think I don't need to explain why Michaelis is great. Also triggers your Martha by benching card from graveyard, is important for the ODK lines, and stuff like that. So there's no reason to play less than 3 of Michaelis. Then double Caspital. She's the next one we definitely need to play 2 of, because often you turn 1, you summon this to get to the follow-up, then you want to be able to have the Floodgate effect, and so you want to have the second one, the extra deck, and also the second one comes up in general for searching, but often this is also a card you want to bench with Prosperity. Then to Sophia, I'm gonna be honest, could just be 1. But there are like 1 or 2 reasons why I'm playing 2. One of them being that sometimes if you're playing against a deck that has graveyard effects in your turn, for example T elements, or maybe even Branded, you want to summon this on your turn, but still have 1 left over in your opponent's turn, and use this to bounce a card and stuff like that. But I think the main reason to play this is that I was playing other rank 4 exceeds that never came up. So I rather have like 1 extra extra name that could come up, so just have 1 more name. For example, one thing I really like to do is if I have the Martha on board with the Michaelis and my opponent threw a hand trap, like for example Imperm or stuff like that, but it needs to be not on the Michaelis. I'll banish the Imperm in the grave, trigger Martha, and summon a Sophia above this, have Returnia face down, so I have the material for the Magnifica, and you can use this in the end phase to play around Nibiru. And that's the reason why I like the second one, so just have an extra name that I can use if I'm going first. So it could also just be a second copy of Jibrin, Jabreen might actually be better because the negation effect of Jabreen comes up way more often than the floodgate effect of a Sophia. So you could also play 2 Jabreen and 1 Sophia. In general, it doesn't really matter because it's just to throw on the board to play around Nibiru a bit better. Also, you can take over bigger monsters if you play 2 Jabreen because you can boost by 1600 instead of just 800. Then, for the other 5 cards in the extra deck, that are probably always the prosp targets. This is also a prosp target because the Sanctuary doesn't matter. You play 1 Baguska. The Baguska comes up sometimes because of Despia, because the endboard of this deck just does nothing against Despia. The banishes are solid, but if you open Serene Fusion they have no negation for anything, they just break your board. That's the reason why sometimes summoning Baguska instead of going for Magnifica is just better. And then 1 Cowboy. To be honest, this could be anything. This could also be just a second copy of Jabreen, and would probably be better, because you never summon this. And even if you would commit for time, if you use Martha, you're extra locked, and if you just summon Cowboy, you can't use Martha afterwards. So you're basically playing for like 30 seconds, and you need to pass turn of with a Cowboy board and nothing else. So Cowboy is pretty bad. Then 2 cards that might actually come up. First of all, Zeus. Like I said, with Aratama and Sakitama, Zeus comes up way more frequently because you're not locked. You can just summon Kashtira. And I also really like just playing around Nibiru, so I won't commit into Martha after I summon the Kashtira. It'll take summon Zeus, have this board right with Zeus, and next time I start playing with Martha or stuff like that. It just kind of have to play around Nibiru with this deck, or like through Nibiru. So just don't commit into Nibiru. Then 1 Typhon. It's just solid. There are scenarios where it comes up, so yeah. Then 1 SP. To be honest, in the last 2 months, I summoned this card once where it was good, and it was just because I got debarriered. And other times, sometimes I thought about summoning it, but it's just not great. One nice thing you could do is, instead of playing a Sanctuary Sophia or something like that, play an Artemis. Even if you're not playing Soror, you could just play an Artemis to link away your Exo monster on board, to have a link monster, to summon her more often, and just have it banished. Could probably be better than a second Sophia. But also, if you do that, you basically have nothing on the board. You only have like maybe Vadis because Returnia is pretty dead then. But it could also banish itself to make Returnia alive, so playing 1 Artemis might be good. But I didn't playtest this. Then for the side deck, 3 Bell. The 3 Bells could also maybe be Crows, but sadly not Bistils, because Bistils just contradict way too much with the deck. The only way you could play Bistils is that you crush your Bistil into an opponent's monster, because even if you open with Magnamut and would play rank 6, so your Martha could trigger in theory, you are already locked out of Martha because you make an Exceed summon for not Exosister monster. And Bell is just solid. Then they have, for example, Stuffing Prince from Grave, Stuffing Wanted, stuff like that. In general, it's decent against Voiceless. Issue with Voiceless is that they can chain block low, and Voiceless is kind of a weird matchup for this deck, because if they get to the end board with the negate, and if there's a Ravens on trap, you basically can't break the board. Then, another reason why you probably play this deck is Inscription, because basically every deck is running 1 Degenerate Floodgate for going first, and Inscription is the Floodgate for this deck. Sure, decks like Flu could also play this deck, but they have Featherstorm, and that's an even stronger Floodgate. But the nice part about Inscription is that it also works going second, but mainly against the Fire King version. It would also work against the Pure version. Issue there is, if they go for the Synchro board, this card just does nothing. So I don't really like siding this in against the Synchro version, the Pure version, because they could end on the Omni Gates, and then this card's just really bad. But against the Fire King version, this card is great. Also, this is one of the reasons why I'm playing Chalice, because if you would only play hand traps, this card would kinda suck, because you would still need to deal with the board. But by playing this, you shut down the graveyard, they have no interrupts on the graveyard, so no Princess, no Garunix, there's no follow-up with Flamberge Dragon. So you just need 1 card to deal with the board, and the board is very often just IP. Maybe there's an Appaloosa, but Chalice is also good against Appaloosa. So I want to have something that deals with the board, and something that deals with the grave. This deals with the grave. It's basically copy 4, 5, and 6 of Shifter. It's just really, really good against decks where it's good against. And yeah, there's also a reason. And in this in copy of Chalice or something like that, or Dark Ruler, is just really, really good. Then I'm playing 3 Dark Ruler. The reason for Dark Ruler is mainly that Chalice does nothing against Voiceless Voice, so you want to have something that you can dig forward to against Voiceless Voice. with Prosperity. I think Dark Ruler is probably the best team. I also considered sliding Lightning Storm to get rid of cards like Super Poly because this is kinda rough. But yeah, Dark Ruler is just overall solid in this deck because the deck struggles at breaking boards, and this at least deals with the monsters on the board. Then I'm playing 3 Cosmics. This was originally mainly for Fire King, but when it got more popular so this card got even better. It's just not as good against the pure Snake Eye version because of the field spell, because if they open the field spell they play around Cosmic, so Cosmic does nothing against this deck then. So yeah, Cosmic is just overall still solid. Then also it's just really good in conjunction with this, because if they have the Fire King Island, use Inscription, use Cyclone, entire board is broken, and you just summon Martha and go from there. And then I'm also playing 3 Judgments. This could also be stuff like Summon Limit, but I just like Judgment because Judgment always does the same. And your deck pretty much struggles against 2 board breakers. One, if you commit for Magnifica, one is completely fine most of the time. But the second one is where you struggle. Also, the way I play a deck, this deck struggles a lot against Evenly Matched. And this is just negation for Evenly Matched if your opponent's playing them. And even if they are not on Evenly Matched and stuff like that, Judgment is just always solid. Summon Limit would also be the option because, like I said, your deck can play into Summon Limit pretty easily because you just summon Martha, go into Michaelis and play from there. But cards like Anti-Spell are not as great because the way I play deck, like I said, I entered my Michaelis Martha. You just search for you need to search for Pax on the follow-up, and then you can't play because you can't use Pax because you have an Anti-Spell. So if you don't commit for Magnifica, Anti-Spell is not as great because you just stop your follow-up. And yeah, you could also play Gozen. You can't play Rivalry or Tizibu, but you could play Gozen. And yeah, that's basically it. If you have some ideas about the deck that I didn't mention in deck profile, just write down in the comments. If you have some questions left, also feel free to write down in the comments. And then yeah, if you enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this, consider subscribing to my channel.